3 years. That was all the Inosphere had. 3 short years for soldiers and civilians to return to their shattered homes in the hope of rebuilding. Every realm was exhausted, some more than others. Militaries had crumbled, infrastructure lay in ruins, and once thriving cities were reduced to rubble. This fragile peace became the hope that every human longed for, a chance to rebuild and begin anew. The Capellan Confederation armed forces were perhaps the most battered and depleted army in the Inosphere. In the wake of peace and the founding of the Captain Bloc, entire regiments were ordered into mandatory rest and refit. For nearly 2 centuries, the men and women of the CCAF had lived under the constant strain of the elastic defense doctrine. The coming 3 years would be the longest reprieve they could expect for a very long time. The Maskarovka, however, enjoyed no such respite. Did they ever? With the CCAF largely grounded, the responsibility for border defense fell to the Feared Intelligence Agency. Over the next 3 years, they observed significant troop movements within the Federated Commonwealth. The Maskarovka ultimately judged these maneuvers to be little more than large-scale defensive exercises and dismissed them. The Capellans attempted to answer movements of their own, but their depleted resources left them with little capacity to respond. All the Confederation could do was hope the Maskarovka's conclusions were correct. Ironically, while nearly everyone agrees that war is horrific and should be avoided at all costs, humanity's fascination with conflict persists. Across many systems of the Inosphere, gladiatorial tournaments became a widespread outlet. These spectacles took many forms: hovercraft racing, aerial dogfighting, conventional sports adapted to mechs, tank derbies, and even company-sized infantry battles. Yet, the most popular and most brutal were the mech-on-mech duels. Numerous leagues existed, both legal and underground, but the most prestigious of all was the Solaris Games, hosted on Solaris 7. In 3027, Justin Jean Allard arrived on Solaris and began competing in the games. At first, he might have seemed just another hopeful warrior, chasing fame and glory, but Alice's past set him apart. Once a Federate Sons mech warrior, he had been charged with treason and personally banished to exile by First Prince Hans Davion himself. For the First Prince to condemn him so directly suggested that Allard had once been a figure of great significance. Once in the arena, Allard deliberately targeted Davion-backed fighters. His defiance caught the attention of the demon, and soon after, he was recruited into the Maskarovka to head a crisis unit specializing in Davion intelligence. At first, the Maskarovka distrusted him. As a former officer of the Federated Sons, many suspected lingering loyalties. But, after close surveillance revealed nothing suspicious, the agency grew complacent and eventually deemed Justin Allard a loyal servant of the Confederation.
Here, my love, I give you the Capellan Confederation.
In February 3028, Melissa Steiner came of age, and her long-arranged betrothal to Hans Davion moved towards fulfillment. On the 20th of August, every House Lord of the Inosphere was summoned to Terra to witness the marriage that would seal the union of the Federated Commonwealth. The ceremony itself was historic, or perhaps in the first time in centuries, the leaders of the great houses stood together without swords drawn or weapons raised. Yet, it was not for this image of fleeting unity that a day would be remembered. The true infamy came during the reception, when First Prince Hans Davion raised his glass in a toast and declared war on the Capellan Confederation. By the time his words rang out, Davion forces had already begun their invasions of the Tikhonov and Sarna systems. At the same time, the Illyrian Commonwealth declared war against the Draconians Combine, seeking to prevent an attack against the Federated Sons' rear. The large-scale troop movements the Maskarovka observed years earlier were revealed for what they were: preparations for this invasion, codename Operation Galahad. For once, the feared intelligence service had failed to uncover the truth. The declaration shattered the fragile Captain Alliance. The Draconians Combine could excuse its lack of support by citing its physical separation from its allies, but the Free Worlds League outright abandoned its pledge of aid, unwilling to risk provoking the Commonwealth. The Capellan Confederation, left isolated, was forced to face the onslaught alone. The Davion offensive struck with overwhelming force. Already weakened, the Capellan defenders were hopelessly outmatched in both numbers and firepower. Where a single Capellan regiment held the line, 3 Davion regiments were unleashed against it. And even when the numbers were even, the Davion forces fielded elite units, Crucius march formations, and even the personal house guards of House Davion. Against such odds, the Capellan Confederation armed forces had little hope of halting the tide. Yet to their credit, they did not break. Regiment after regiment fought to the last, defiant in the face of inevitable defeat. To say Maximilian was furious would be an understatement. When Hans Davion raised his infamous toast, the Chancellor of the Capellan Confederation became the very embodiment of rage. He stormed out of the wedding hall and immediately returned to Sion to prepare defense. Maximilian's council, his family, and his crisis team could do little but watch as world after world fell under Davion control. Worse still, prestigious mercenary units such as the Northwind Highlanders defected to the Federated Sons. The Highlanders had served the Capellans since the 2800s, after the Sons' conquests of their homeworld of Northwind. Now, in exchange for the right to return home, the Highlanders abandoned their longtime employer. Most of the clans accepted the offer, though a few, such as Clan Joffrey, remained loyal to the Confederation. 2 months of unbroken defeats wore heavily on the Chancellor's mind, marking the beginning of his mental decline. Eventually, the Maskarovka identified what they believe were critical logistical choke points on 6 planets. Plans were immediately drawn up for raids against these targets, followed by a wider counteroffensive against the entire Davion invasion. The intelligence had been provided by Michael Hazak Davion as part of his secret dealings with the Chancellor. 6 regiments were raised from the remnants of shattered formations. Many were volunteers seeking to redeem their earlier failures. Recruiting from broken units also preserved the Federation's few fresh troops for later use. The counterattack was codenamed Operation Riposte, and it began as soon as preparations were complete. But what the Confederation expected did not occur. The intelligence Michael supplied had been deliberately planted by the Federated Sons, who had long suspected his duplicity. The raids only confirmed it. Capellan forces were annihilated almost the moment they landed. One small consolation emerged from the disaster though. During the raid on Axton, a secret Battletech research facility was uncovered on the world of Bethel. Justin Ellert immediately began an operation to seize it, just as troubling news arrived from the Forbidden Palace, that Michael Hazak Davion himself had come to Sion. Knowing his days were numbered, Michael sought refuge with the Confederation, claiming only a Capellan victory could save him. He brought with him what he insisted was reliable military intelligence, and even promised to declare open war against House Davion. But Maximilian was unconvinced. A lifetime of political intrigue had taught him that men willing to betray one master will betray the next just as quickly. The demon listened to Michael's proposals in silence, then ordered them burned. He turned to Justin Ellert and gave a single nod. Understanding at once, Justin drew his service pistol and executed the Duke where he stood. The following year, Michael's body was returned to the Federated Sons. Official Davion propaganda declared he had been murdered while attempting to negotiate peace. To this day, many citizens of the Capellan March still believe that lie.